Political and legal blogger for Salon.com. Glenn, you've written extensively on the Obama administration's reaction to leakers within the government. Could you talk about this latest development and now the clear record that's being established by the Obama administration in this regard?
Well, there's no question. I mean, even the New York Times and Newsweek, albeit a little late in the game, but better late than never, had articles within the last several weeks documenting that the Obama administration's assault on whistleblowers is more extreme than any prior administration, including the Bush administration, which was frequently accused of trying to silence whistleblowers. And I think, the important point in this latest case is to emphasize that a lot of caution is required in terms of assuming that we actually know what took place here, and that in terms of what happened with Bradley Manning. I mean, first of all, everything that we know about what happened or what supposedly happened comes from a very unstable and untrustworthy source, whose name is Adrian Lamo, a convicted hacker and someone who has severe mental illness. He just, right before this supposedly happened, had been involuntarily committed in a mental institution. And everything that we know comes from what he claims took place, all of which is being filtered through a single reporter who has a very long and odd history with Lamo. But I think the more important point here is the one that Dan Ellsberg just illustrated and that you just asked about, which is, remember that in 2008, the U.S. military, the U.S. Army Counterintelligence Division, prepared a report which described Wikileaks as a threat to national security and talked about ways to destroy its ability to function. And the principal thing that they emphasized was if they create a perception that their sources are no longer safe and they start exposing these sources and creating the perception that WikiLeaks itself or associating with it is dangerous, it'll dry up the willingness of people to turn over classified information and leak classified information to WikiLeaks. That's exactly what has happened here. Suddenly, a 22-year-old private who supposedly has access to vast amounts of classified information contacts someone who's a complete stranger and over the internet, in an internet chat, confesses to crimes that could send him to prison for the rest of his life. And then suddenly there's a WikiLeaks leaker who not only released the video, but turned over 250,000 pages of classified diplomatic cables. And then there's news headlines saying there's a worldwide manhunt for WikiLeaks. I mean, it's exactly what the U.S. military described it wanted to do in order to destroy WikiLeaks. And I think a lot of caution is required here. And that report was prepared before the Apache helicopter video was publicized. Imagine how much now the military wants to destroy WikiLeaks, and you combine that with the Obama administration's war on whistleblowers, and I think an extreme amount of caution is required before we assume that we know what happened in this very strange and odd case.
Glenn Greenwald, can you talk about the Thomas Drake case?
Thomas Drake was an official, a high-ranking official at the National Security Agency who was aware of extreme amounts of waste and corruption taking place with a variety of contracts that were between the NSA and some of the largest contractors, private contractors. And some of those contracts were to develop surveillance systems that he thought were insufficiently protective of the privacy of American citizens. And he tried to get supervisors and high-level officials within NSA and lawyers within NSA to pay attention to what it was that he had discovered, and he was basically ignored the way that most whistleblowers within the federal government are ignored when they try to bring exposure to it using the systems within the government. And so he allegedly went to a reporter at the Baltimore Sun and told her about what it was that was going on. And she wrote a series of articles detailing the billions and billions of dollars that basically were burned by the NSA in exchange for absolutely nothing. It was pure whistleblowing of the most noble and well-intentioned kind. There's no indication at all that it even remotely harmed national security. And the Obama administration has now obtained an indictment, the Obama DOJ did, in a way that the Bush administration never did, and is persecuting this very noble whistleblower, which is just part of an overall pattern.
In April, after the Wikileaks release of the Iraq video, we interviewed Julian Assange on Democracy Now! And asked him about the government crackdown on Wikileaks. He talked about the 2008 U.S. Army counterintelligence report that targeted Wikileaks.
That report sort of looks at different ways to destroy wikileaks.org or fatally marginalize it. And because our primary asset is the trust that sources have in us, we have a reputation for having never had a source publicly exposed, and as far as I know, that reputation is true. It looks to see whether they can publicly expose some of our sources, prosecute U.S. military whistleblowers, and in fact, it uses the phrase whistleblowers, not people who are leaking indiscriminately, but prosecute U.S. military whistleblowers in order to destabilize us and destroy what it calls our center of gravity, the trust that the public and sources have in us. It also looks at some other methods. It's careful to fine-tune the language, but says that perhaps we could be hacked into and destabilized that way, or perhaps we could be fed information that was fraudulent, and therefore our reputation for integrity could be destroyed. Now, the report is careful on these last two to suggest that maybe other governments could do this. It seems like it's some kind of license for their claims. They speak about how Iran has blocked us on the internet and China has blocked us on the internet, and other governments of a similar type have condemned us. It lists Israel, and it also lists the case that we had against the Swiss bank in San Francisco in February 2008, a case which we conclusively won. But in the production of this video in Iceland, where most of the team was, over the last month, we did get a number of very unusual surveillance events. So I personally had people filming me covertly in cafes who, when confronted, run off so scared that they even dropped their cash, and not Icelanders, outsiders, although there also was some surveillance from Iceland. Our feeling is now that that surveillance may not have been related to this video. It may more likely have been related to leaks from the US Embassy in Iceland that we released. We're not sure of that, but there was appears to have been a following of me on an Icelandic air flight out of Iceland to investigative journalism conference in Norway. We're not sure that there are records of 2 State Department employees on that plane with no luggage. Our suspicion is these are probably the Diplomatic Security Service investigating that leak at the embassy. We did have a volunteer arrested for some other reason and asked questions in Iceland about WikiLeaks, but there are now 2 sides to this story. So our volunteer says that they were asked questions about WikiLeaks, and the police say that they were asked questions about WikiLeaks. But the police say this was because of a sticker on a laptop. Volunteer says that this wasn't true, and at the moment we're unable to confirm whether the police had inside information about the video or whether the volunteer is not telling